In 1977, a 17-year-old was helping his father mail out a small tool catalogue from a warehouse in North Hollywood. His name was Eric Smith. His father, Alan, had spent years in the close-out business, buying surplus and selling it cheap. The catalogue was called Harbor Freight. It was thin, and the tools inside were cheap. Nobody in the American tool industry took either of them seriously. At least that was what everyone thought. 47 years later, Eric Smith is one of the richest men in the United States. The company his father started with a catalogue now runs more than 1,500 stores across all 50 states. And it owns more American tool brand names than Stanley Black & Decker. More than Sears at its peak. Pittsburgh, Bauer, Hercules, Icon, Quinn, Predator, Chicago Electric, Central Machinery, Warrior, Doyle. Every one of those names lives inside a single privately held company, a company still associated in the public mind with the cheap tarp tent sale. The story of how that happened is not the story of a discount retailer. It is the story of the last major tool empire built in America, hidden in plain sight inside a red and black warehouse in Calabasas. This is the fascinating story of Harbor Freight, the brand empire hidden behind Icon, Pittsburgh, Quinn, and Bauer. Alan Smith was born in Los Angeles in the years after the Second World War. Before he founded a tool catalogue, he sold insurance. Before that, he worked in closeouts. The closeout business in 1960s. Southern California was a scrappy trade. Buyers walked bankrupt warehouses and estate sales, bought inventory by the pallet, and moved it wherever it would sell. Alan had a good eye for what a home mechanic would pay for. The Harbor Freight catalogue began in a small warehouse. The premise was simple. Buy tools cheap, print a black and white catalogue, mail it to men who needed a wrench or a socket set but could not afford to walk into a Sears store and pay full price. The margins were thin. The volume was small. The business ran on the willingness of one family to work long hours for narrow returns. Nobody was paying attention to the Smith catalogue back then. American tool retail in the 1970s belonged to Sears. Craftsman was the standard. If a man wanted a set of screwdrivers he could hand down to his son, he drove to Sears. The Craftsman lifetime warranty was legendary. The tools were forged in Colorado Springs and Milwaukee and Cleveland. Harbor Freight was not competing with that world. Harbor Freight served the men who wanted a hammer for one job and did not care whose name was on the handle. That was the ceiling everyone assumed the business would hit. It was about to change. In 1977, Eric Smith began working full-time in his father's business. He was 17 years old. He packed orders. He handled returns. He read customer letters. What he saw in those letters shaped every decision he would make for the next 4 decades. Customers were not writing to complain about the price. They were writing to complain about the tools. A pipe wrench with a slipping jaw, a drill motor that burned out on the second use, a socket that rounded off a bolt. The Harbor Freight catalogue had built its business on being cheaper than Sears, and the cheapness came at a cost. Every returned tool was proof that the closeout model had limits. Eric watched his father work through those returns, one letter at a time. He also watched the arithmetic. A tool sold at $4 that came back for a refund cost the company more than a tool sold at $6 that stayed with the customer. Cheap was not the same as profitable. Cheap and reliable was. That was the insight that separated the son from the father. If you are enjoying this documentary so far, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps us grow. Also, please say in the comments where you are watching from today. Thanks. Alan Smith was a close-out man. He bought what was available and sold what he could. Eric wanted something different. He wanted control of the supply, wanted to know where every tool came from, who made it, and whether the next batch would work as well as the last. He did not have the money to build factories, or the credit to buy them. But he had something Sears did not have. He had time, the patience of a private company, and a father willing to let him try. The clock was already ticking on the mail order catalogue. Eric just did not know yet what he was building toward. For a while, things had actually seemed fine. The catalogue kept mailing. New customers kept ordering. Cash flowed in from zip codes across the country. That did not last. By the early 1980s, the Harbor Freight catalogue had a problem it could not print its way out of. Word had spread. Among American tradesmen, the name had become shorthand for cheap tools that would not last. Mechanics warned each other. Contractors laughed at the catalogue. Serious craftsmen dismissed the entire operation as a novelty for hobbyists. For a mail-order business, reputation was inventory. If the working men of America decided a name was junk, no discount would recover the customer. The catalogue kept selling to first-time buyers. It struggled to keep them. Eric Schmidt looked at the numbers and saw the trap his father had built the company into. Every catalogue cycle burned goodwill. Every returned tool was a customer who would not order again. The closeout model that had launched the business was now the ceiling of it. And then Eric Schmidt made the two decisions that would define everything that came next. The first was to move the company off closeout inventory. The second was to move the company off American manufacturing. Neither decision was popular with the industry. Both were financially rational. American tool factories in the 1980s were expensive to buy from. Union labor, aging plants, and rising material costs meant that a hammer forged in Ohio cost significantly more than one forged in Taiwan, or increasingly, mainland China. The industrial capacity of coastal China was ramping up. American importers, who could navigate the shipping and quality control, got a landed cost on a socket set that made the craftsman equivalent look like a luxury item. Sears knew this too. Sears would begin licensing craftsman manufacturing overseas within a decade. But Sears was a public company, and public companies moved slowly. Eric Schmidt was a private company. He could move as fast as he wanted. He wanted to move quickly. The first Harbor Freight retail stores opened in the middle of the 1980s. They were unglamorous. Warehouse-style buildings on the edge of town, with fluorescent lighting and metal shelving and cardboard bin signs. The tools on the shelves were the same tools from the catalogue. The prices were lower than any competitor, and customers who had ordered by mail for years could now walk in and feel the wrench before they paid for it. But the retail stores were the surface change. The deeper change was happening thousands of miles away, inside factories in Guangdong and Zhejiang and Shandong. Eric Schmidt had begun traveling to China. He did not go as a tourist. He went with specifications. He walked forging plants and stamping shops and plastic injection facilities. He looked at the tolerances on the machines. He watched how the workers handled a batch. He asked how the alloys were mixed. When he found a factory that could hit the quality he wanted at a price the American mail-order customer would pay, he committed to volume that the factory owner had never seen from a foreign buyer. Volume gave him leverage. Leverage gave him the right to rewrite the specifications. Over the course of the late 1980s and through the 1990s, Schmidt spent an enormous portion of his working life inside Chinese plants. He was not the only American doing this, but most American importers were placing orders and hoping. Schmidt was engineering. He was pushing his suppliers to tighten the tolerances on a socket set until the numbers looked like a craftsman's spec. Then he was buying the entire output of the line. The result was a category of tool that had not existed before. Not cheap, not premium, something in between. A tool that a working man could afford on Saturday morning and that would still turn a bolt on Sunday. Smith gave that category a name. He called it Pittsburgh. The irony of the naming was not lost on anyone who thought about it. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania was the American Steel City. The name evoked coke ovens and open hearths, and the men who built the industrial century. The tools Smith was branding Pittsburgh were forged in Chinese plants, on Chinese steel, by Chinese workers. But the name did what it needed to do. When a customer walked into a Harbor Freight store and saw Pittsburgh stamped on a ratchet, the name reassured him. It sounded like something that could be trusted. Smith backed the name with a lifetime warranty on the core hand tools, the same warranty Craftsman had built its reputation on. If a Pittsburgh wrench broke, the customer brought it back to any Harbor Freight store, no receipt required, and walked out with a new one. That single decision, more than any pricing strategy, moved Harbor Freight out of the discount category and into direct competition with Sears. By the 2000s, the Pittsburgh line had become the flagship of the store. But Smith was not finished. He had watched Sears build the Craftsman brand into a tiered system, with different sub-brands and price points serving different customers. He decided to do the same thing, faster. Quinn came next, positioned as a premium hand tool line for customers who wanted a Pittsburgh quality wrench with tighter finishing and better ergonomics. Bauer arrived as the accessible, cordless power tool platform, aimed squarely at the weekend homeowner who could not justify the price of a DeWalt. Hercules followed, engineered for the professional trades who needed torque and battery life comparable to Milwaukee's M18 platform. Then, Icon, the most ambitious of them all, was built to sit inside a mechanic's toolbox next to Snap-on. The finish, the click, the feel in the hand, the price point, all of it was calibrated to give a working technician a reason to walk past the Snap-on truck. Around those 5 names, Smith built out an entire portfolio. Predator for small gas engines and generators aimed at Honda's home category, Chicago Electric for welders and power equipment, Central Machinery for lathes, mills, and larger shop equipment, Warrior for the entry-level throwaway tier, Doyle for premium mechanics hand tools inside the Icon family. Each name filled a slot. Each slot corresponded to a competitor. Harbor Freight was trying to peel a customer away from. The strategy was the mirror image of what Stanley Black & Decker was doing. Stanley Black & Decker had spent decades buying up American brands and consolidating them under one corporate roof. DeWalt, Craftsman, Porter Cable, Stanley, Black & Decker, and dozens of others. Harbor Freight was not buying brands. It was building them. From scratch, around a single sourcing operation. And while Smith was building, Sears was collapsing. Everything Sears had built was about to work against it. The retail overhead that had once been Sears' competitive advantage, the anchor stores in every American mall, the sales staff, the credit desk, the appliance floor, became a fixed cost the company could not carry as its foot traffic declined. The Craftsman brand, once the flagship of the store, had been sourced overseas for years. By the 2010s, some Craftsman tools were coming off the same Chinese lines that were producing Pittsburgh. The customer noticed. The premium had evaporated. If 2 wrenches came off the same forging line and one cost twice as much because it said Craftsman on the handle, the customer with a mortgage and a truck payment made the rational choice. In 2017, Sears sold the Craftsman brand to Stanley Black & Decker for approximately $900 million. Sears kept a partial license to sell Craftsman in its remaining stores. Within a few years, most of those stores were closed. Stanley Black & Decker moved a portion of Craftsman production back to the United States, into a plant in Fort Worth, Texas. It was a good story. It was also a much smaller Craftsman than the one that had once anchored the Sears floor. Over the same span, Harbor Freight kept opening stores. 100 a year, then more. By the mid-2020s, the count had passed 1,500. Eric Schmidt, still private, still headquartered in Calabasas, had built an operation with revenues estimated in the multiple billions annually. Forbes listed him among the wealthiest Americans. The catalogue his father had mailed from a North Hollywood warehouse now had a market presence that dwarfed the Sears his father had once undercut. The full circle of the story is stamped on the tools themselves. A Pittsburgh combination wrench and a mid-2000s Craftsman combination wrench held side by side under fluorescent light are often forged in the same Chinese plant. The steel is the same. The heat treatment is the same. The tolerance is close enough that only a metallurgist could tell them apart. What differs is the name, the warranty desk that honors the name, and the retail chain that sold them. Sears sold the customer. Harbor Freight bought him. What survives of the Craftsman name lives inside a corporation in New Britain, Connecticut, alongside every other American tool brand Stanley Black & Decker has assembled. What survives of the Sears store network is a handful of buildings, most repurposed. The Colorado Springs plant that once forged Craftsman screwdrivers, Western Forge, closed after nearly 7 decades of operation. The men who worked there scattered, and in 1,500 red and black warehouses across the United States, a different generation of working men is walking the aisles. Fathers buying their first floor jack, mechanics restocking a socket set, grandsons picking up a Pittsburgh screwdriver for a Saturday project. The pegboard in the garage looks different than it did in 1970. The names on the tools have changed, but the hand that reaches for the wrench is the same hand. Somewhere in Calabasas, inside an office most Harbor Freight customers will never see, Eric Schmidt is still working, still private, still building. And on a pegboard in a garage in Ohio, a Pittsburgh wrench hangs where a Craftsman used to.